Hello friends, I hope you're all doing well. In today's class, we're going to design this complete wheel, and you can see the final render on your screen. So without wasting any time, let's jump right into today's class. First, I'll import a reference image by going into the top view, and by pressing Shift plus S and selecting Selection to Cursor, the reference image will move to the center of the world's origin, because our 3D cursor is already at the world's origin. Now I'll delete the default cube, and after deleting it, I'll press Shift plus A to create a circle. Then in edit mode, I'll scale up the circle, extrude it by pressing E, and then scale it down by pressing S. I'll repeat the extrude and scale process once more. I'll enable X-ray mode and switch to vertex select mode. Then I'll select the vertices on one side and delete them. After that, I'll create an edge loop, making sure that it runs exactly through the center. Then I'll go back to vertex select mode, select those 3 vertices, and delete them. Now you'll see that this part is separated. If I move the mouse cursor over it and press L, all the linked vertices or geometry will be selected, and I can delete them. Now you'll see that we are left with this remaining part. I'll add a mirror modifier to it, and instead of the x-axis, I'll select the y-axis. Now I'll create an edge loop here, and then I'll add a few more edge loops according to the shape. I'll switch to face select mode and select these faces to delete them. Then I'll create an edge loop here and another edge loop there. After that, I'll switch to vertex select mode and adjust the vertices to match the shape. I will also select and delete these faces, and then make sure that the clipping option in the mirror modifier is enabled. After that, I'll select this edge loop and extrude it by pressing E, then scale it down. Next, I'll adjust the vertices again to match the geometry of the shape. And move them downward along the Z-axis. After that, I'll select these faces and extrude them downward along the Z-axis. And then scale them down and move them along the X-axis to adjust them according to the reference image. Now you can see that we have this part left. I'll go back into X-ray mode, and since these faces are also extruded inward, I'll select them and extrude them along the Z-axis. Scaling them down and moving them along the X-axis to get the shape as close as possible to the reference image. Also, make sure that this vertex is aligned properly with the others, so I'll move it to match. After that, I'll switch to edge select mode and select the edges that need to remain sharp. And then bevel them by pressing Ctrl B. Now you can right-click and select Shade Smooth. And after that, you can add a subdivision surface modifier. For now, I'll keep the subdivision surface modifier hidden. I'm going to add an array modifier and move it above the subdivision surface modifier in the stack. In the array modifier settings, you'll uncheck the relative offset. Then I'll press Shift A to create an empty object, and in the array modifier settings, I'll enable Object Offset and select that empty object. Make sure that the Merge option is checked. Now when you rotate the empty object, the copies will be generated in a circular pattern thanks to the array modifier. Right now, the count is set to 2, but I'll increase it to 6 since we need 6 copies based on our reference image. You can see that there's a gap between the first and the last copy. To reduce that gap, we can rotate the empty object further, but that will cause uneven spacing in the center of all these parts. So I'll go into edit mode, select the vertices of the main object, and move them closer together so that they merge. Now you can see that all the vertices have merged properly, and the gap between the first and last copy is gone. In the reference image, this area is a bit higher, so I'll select these edges and move them upwards along the z-axis. Actually, I realize it's the other part that needs adjustment, so I'll select the edges of that part and move them up. Once we enable the subdivision surface modifier, you can see it gives a nice, smooth result. However, the first and last copies are not merging properly. We'll address that in a moment. First, I'll select these faces, and by pressing I, I'll inset them, making sure to press B so that they don't inset along the boundary. Then I'll use the loop tools to turn this inset into a circle. If needed, I'll rotate it slightly to get it just right, and then I'll extrude it inward. After that, I'll select the edges and add a bevel to smooth them out. Now regarding the first and last copies not merging, even though we have the merge option checked in the array modifier, we also need to check the first and last copies option so that they merge seamlessly. Once we do that, everything should look perfect. Now I'll select this object along with the empty object and press M to create a new collection named Rim in object mode. This will move our selected objects into a newly created collection, which you can see in the outliner. Next, I'll duplicate these objects by pressing Shift plus D and move them into another collection called Backup, which I'll keep hidden just in case we need it later. After that, I'll apply the mirror and array modifiers on the object, but I'll leave the subdivision modifier as it is without applying it. Now, if I go into vertex select mode and select the outer vertices, right-click and choose Circle from the loop tools, it will create a perfect circular shape for the border. Before using the Circle tool, you might have noticed some slight corners, and this helps to smooth them out completely. If you don't see the Loop Tools option, you can go into the Preferences under the Edit menu, find the Add-on section, search for Loop Tools, and enable it. Once it's enabled, you'll have access to the Loop Tools whenever you right-click in Edit mode. Now I'll go ahead and hide the rim collection as well as the reference image I was using before. Then I'll import a new reference image that shows the outer part, the pattern outside of the rim. This new reference will help us create that pattern accurately. I'll add a plane by pressing Shift plus A and then go into Edit mode to move and adjust the plane so it lines up with the reference image. By enabling X-ray mode, I can see through the geometry and ensure everything is aligned perfectly. I'll then use the Extrude and Move tools to shape the plane according to the pattern in the reference image. Essentially, I'm just going to keep extruding and adjusting the shape until it matches the design we want. To add the curve into our shape, I'll create an edge loop by pressing Ctrl plus R. This will help us introduce more geometry in the areas where we need that smooth curve. By adding these edge loops, we can then move the vertices to match the curvature seen in the reference image. This way, even though our initial shape is quite simple, we can refine it and add more detail to achieve the pattern we want. Now that the pattern is taking shape, I'll switch over to Edge Select Mode and choose the top edge loop. By pressing E, I'll extrude it outwards, making sure that it matches the design in the reference. Since the pattern might be narrower on one side and wider on the other, I'll go into Vertex Select Mode and adjust each vertex individually to ensure that the pattern lines up perfectly. This part might take a bit of time, but it's definitely worth the effort to get that accuracy and achieve the exact look you want. Alright, so now that the top part of the pattern is extruded and adjusted to match the design, we can see there's a bit of spacing both above and below the pattern. To keep everything even and balanced, we'll split this spacing in half. This means we'll extrude the bottom edge loop just halfway to create half of that gap, and then adjust the vertices so that everything aligns nicely. We'll do the same with the top edge loop, extruding it upward just halfway as well. This way, once we apply the array modifier later on, everything will line up perfectly and we won't have any issues with the spacing. Alright, now that we've got the pattern designed just the way we want it, I'll go ahead and extrude those faces to the desired length. Once that's done, I'll hide the reference image since we don't need it anymore. Then I'll add a mirror modifier, but instead of using the x-axis, I'll switch it to the y-axis. If there's a bit of spacing left, I'll make sure clipping is enabled and adjust the vertices so that they merge nicely and there's no gap. After that, I'll add an array modifier and I'll carefully adjust the factor and spacing so that everything lines up and merges perfectly. If there's any leftover gap in the center, I'll just tweak the vertices a little more to ensure everything is perfectly aligned. Once all the parts are merged nicely, I'll go ahead and increase the count value to 25. After that, I'll apply a simple deform modifier and select the bend option. I'll set the axis to the z-axis. Then I'll create an empty object and use that empty as the origin for the simple deform. By rotating the empty, I'll be able to bend the object smoothly. I'll rotate the empty on the x-axis by -90 degrees and then adjust the angle in the simple deform modifier to 360 degrees. If the circle isn't fully closed, I'll increase the angle a bit more until the shape is perfectly merged at the start and end points. I'll make a few more adjustments to the mesh now. I'll go into edit mode, select the top vertex first and then the lower vertex, and press M to merge them, choosing the at last option so that the top vertex will merge downwards. This will help shape the wheel a bit more. Right now the wheel looks pretty flat, so to give it a bit of curvature, I'll select some vertices in X-ray mode and move them slightly downward along the Z-axis. I'll also rotate them a bit to get that nice, smooth bend on the sides, repeating the process around the shape until everything looks just right. The shape is really coming together nicely. Now I'll go into Edge Select mode and select these edges, moving them slightly downward along the Z-axis and then outwards a bit on the Y-axis. After that, I'll move them a little more downward to refine the shape. Then I'll select both the main object and the empty object and move them upward together. I'll unhide the rim part we designed earlier. If the rotation of the rim looks off, I'll select both the rim and it's empty and rotate them 90 degrees on the X-axis. I'll also scale the rim up to match the wheel size. Once that's done, I'll adjust the wheel's position relative to the rim. Now I'll select the outer edge loop of rim and extrude inward along the Y-axis and move further along the Y-axis inwards. This way we get a really nice final shape and it all comes together beautifully. To get a better look at the extrusion, I'll temporarily hide the wheel and then extrude the shape as needed. After that, I'll press Ctrl R to add 2 edge loops and scale them along the Y-axis to create even spacing between them. Then, in Face Select mode, I'll select that loop of faces and use Alt and E to extrude them along the normals, pushing them inward. This will give us a really nice shape. I'll then select that edge loop and bevel it, and I'll do the same for any other edges that need that smoother, rounded look. Once everything looks good, I'll go ahead and unhide the wheel again. Out part is good, but I think width is a little too much. By scaling down the wheel along the Y-axis, you can get that perfect width, and adjusting the position relative to the rim will make everything align just right. Adding that bevel modifier and fine-tuning the amount and segments really helps smooth out the shape. And of course, once you right-click and shade smooth, everything looks even better. If you want to go that extra step, adding a subdivision surface modifier can definitely give it that extra level of smoothness and detail, making the final shape look really polished and professional. Now that both parts are complete, I'll move on to applying the material. If you want, you can create a material from scratch, but I'll be using the Blender Toolkit add-on. If you don't have it installed, I'll include the link in the description so you can download and install it. The Blender Toolkit team provides a lot of free assets, like materials and objects which you can use freely in your projects. For example, if I go to the materials section and search for rubber, I'll see a variety of rubber materials. Once you find one you like, you can click and drag it onto the object you want to apply it to. It might take a moment to download and apply. I'll temporarily unhide the subdivision surface modifier. If the material doesn't show up in solid preview mode, switching to material preview mode will display the material on that part of the wheel. Now I'm going to apply the material to the rim, and for that, I'll create the material from scratch. However, I'm noticing an issue here. It seems we made a mistake, and I've already applied the array modifier. So I'll go into edit mode and check if the vertices are not merged. Yes, that's the case, but it's not a big problem. I'll select the vertices, press M, and choose at center to merge them. I'll do the same with the rest of the vertices by selecting them, pressing M, and merging them at the center. There's another minor issue, but we'll fix that later. First, I'll merge these vertices. Then I'll go into Edge Select mode, select these edges, and delete them. I'll temporarily hide the subdivision surface modifier from the viewport. In Vertex Select mode, I'll add a vertex using Ctrl-R, and then select the vertices and press F to fill them. I'll repeat this for the rest, and you'll see the issue is resolved. In the center, there was a part left out, so I'll select that edge loop, right-click, go to the loop tool and click Circle to make it perfectly circular. I'll press F to fill it, then extrude it and scale it down. I'll bevel that edge loop and another edge loop as well. I'll select the face, inset it, and press Shift-R to repeat the inset. After enabling the subdivision surface modifier again, the rim looks complete. In the reference image, the center part had a cut, but we didn't remove those faces. You can either leave it as it is or delete it if you prefer. If you want to remove them, you can go into Face Select mode, select those faces, and delete them. However, that might cause an issue. If I hide the subdivision surface modifier from the viewport, you'll see that the problem was due to those faces. After deleting them, the issue will no longer appear. But I'll leave it as it is and not delete them. Now this part is complete, and I'll create a simple material for it. I'll keep the color white, set the metallic value to full, and adjust the roughness to my preference. I hope you understood everything from today's class. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comment section and I'll definitely respond. If you enjoyed the video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next class. Until then, goodbye and take care.